So did you start in the news columnist editor business? Did you start in Tucson? Because Tucson Citizen.
Yes.
Right.
Well, I was the editorial page editor and columnist in Tucson. Before that, I worked for weeklies in Michigan, a chain of weeklies, and then I worked in briefly for a daily in Casa Grande, Arizona, I was the city editor. So I've done the news side, I've done the opinion side, I've done all the sides of the newspaper. At the weeklies, you are the sports editor, the living editor, the dead editor.
Everything? You're the obituary guy? Is that where everyone starts?
It is. It's a good place to start.
Why?
Because then you really learn the business top to bottom. My first newspaper, I even sold ads. And I had to collect from people who weren't paying their bills on subscriptions.
How hard was that?
Crazy. That was really tough. I couldn't wait to get out of that. But when you're in a weekly, we used to joke that if they get a call for the outdoor editor, you say, well, hold on a second while I step outdoors. You're doing everything. School boards, zoning meetings. You're never at home for dinner. You're constantly working. So when you hear people, there's an old legend in the news business that guys at dailies always say, well, someday I'd like to get a job and my own little weekly paper and put my feet up on the desk. Forget about it, pal. It's never going to happen. You work like a dog at a weekly.
I think that how much of who you are today comes from what I call that hustle and grind.
Oh, yeah.
How much of that?
Well, I noticed that when I eventually got to dailies and then climbed the ladder up to positions that I've always wanted, which was an opinion guy, writing columns because that's my love, that there were a lot of people who came out of college and went to a daily who had never had that full-rounded experience of really having to grind, of having to do it right, of having to look over the shoulder and make sure they're covering all the bases. And I wouldn't say, I don't want to say lazy, but the work ethic was not there. They would turn in one story a week and think they're working hard. I was used to filling an entire weekly paper every week. And the same thing with small dailies. You got to grind. You got to churn out copy, and you got to be fast. You got to be able to work on deadline. I think that's probably the biggest thing that you learn in that kind of furnace of test.
How many of those people that you saw coming, how many washed out?
The surprising thing to me was that a lot of people wash out on the weeklies because they just can't take the pace. And even the small dailies. But in the bigger dailies, once they get on board, they kind of hang around and people move them around to find better positions for them where they don't have as much stress or pressure. A lot of people, too, that really didn't have a very good grasp of writing and grammar and spelling. And I was kind of shocked because I thought, once you get to the big daily, you're working with the elite, right? No, not necessarily.
I've found through my career, and it sounds like this, I'm assuming, so we've only been sitting here for 7 or 8 minutes, I'm assuming that who you've become, if you were sitting talking to your best friend, whoever that is, could be your best friend, that's when the honesty comes out.
Sure.
The things we don't share with anybody else. I bet what would come through all those late nights, the early mornings, the hard work, the determination, being relentless, persistence. And then you're like, guys, if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have been here.
Oh, that's very true.
Right?
Very true. I used to say you can't always be where you want to be to get where you want to go. So I worked at little weeklies. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be at the Detroit Free Press or the daily paper. But to get where I wanted to go, it turns out looking back now, I can see that God had a plan for me, and he wanted me to be there to get to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. And any shortcut on that would have been a different career. It would have been a different life. I might still be back in East Lansing where I went to college. Who knows? It's kind of fun to think about that from time to time. But
yeah, you just wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here without it.
That's right.
Right? And you probably look back and you're happy that Peter did all those things so you could be sitting here.
Yes, and fortunately, wives keep us humble, and my wife is great that she reminds me of that from time to time when I start trashing some people I used to work with, and she'll say, yeah, but if you hadn't done that, if you hadn't had that kind of experience with that boss, it wouldn't have made you a better supervisor and manager when you got to that position, which is very true.
Isn't that hard to see that in the moment?
It is.
It's almost impossible.
It is.
So what keeps us going? So when you were talking about all the dailies and being the outdoor sales guy when you need to, right? The advertising guy. What keeps you going when so many other people are submitting one a week and you're submitting 6, 8, 10, 12? Why?
Well, it was, first of all, love of writing. I just love it. I love meeting people, telling their stories, and it is a real honor and privilege because people will, you talk about people open up when they're with their best friend or after they've had a few drinks or something. You'd be surprised how people open up if you walk up to them with a pencil or a pen and a reporter's notebook in your hand and you say, "Hi, I'm from the Cincinnati Enquirer, and I'd like to interview about something." And, I mean, people, they love that. As you know, doing podcasts, people love to tell their stories, just like I'm doing right now. And it's something that we all have inside us, and to have somebody come up and say, not only can I tell them my story, and they're going to, what, listen? You know, they're not going to try and top me or jump in, but also they're going to write it down and put it in the paper for other people to read.
And take a guy like you, a guy that's educated, skilled, practiced, probably developed a level of mastery as you went through the years. You could actually articulate my story better than me, probably.
Well, we hope to. You know, there's many a slip, and we make mistakes.
But that's a part of our stories.
It is. It is a part of our stories. And people, when they talk to you, they sometimes forget how they sound. And sometimes they call you up later and go, "Wow, I didn't like the way I sounded at all." And you're kind of like, "Oh." But most of the time, yes. I was gratified to be able to tell stories for people that every now and then I still run into people in Cincinnati who will come up to me and say, "Oh my gosh, you wrote a column about me in 1994 or something," and I remember this that was so great. Thank you so much for doing that. Or you wrote a column about my dad and his service in the military, and it meant so much to him. That's really cool stuff. We used to call that the refrigerator award. When somebody clipped your column and put it on the refrigerator, that was better than any prizes, believe me.
It's do you remember the first time you walked into someone's home? Did you ever see that?
To see my own column.
Did you see it? Magnet on a fridge. Did you ever see that?
I did see it once or twice, but the funniest one was when people would send me, they would clip my column and send it to me in the mail and right at the top, "Have you read this?"
Oh, shit. Oh.
No, I just wrote it.
The insinuation was, "We don't like it." Am I assuming that right?
Oh, no, it's usually
Was it
very
good?
Yeah, very
Oh,
positive.
really?
Like,
Okay.
"Oh, you'll enjoy this. Have you read it?" I
Okay.
go, "Well, that's my byline on the top." So, yeah, I guess I read it.
So what's cool is I love your story. That chili press, those of us from Cincinnati,
Chili Dog Press.
we think that that's what we call chili, a Skyline and Gold Star and all the other individuals, Price Hill Chili. But Chili Dog Press was named after Chili the Labrador.
That's right.
Right?
You've done your homework.
Well, we're supposed to a little bit, right?
Yeah, it was kind of one of those accidental things that just kind of worked out. And she was a great dog. We got her in Arizona, and she would chase coyotes, and I mean, it was just a fun dog. And so we liked her, and I was starting a publishing company. I said, "Oh, let's name it Chili Dog Press," and it ended up being a great fit for Cincinnati because, hey, this is the chili town,
Right? Yeah. I think without us knowing each other before today, what I love about you is there's a sense of a rebel inside of you.
Oh, yeah.
And what I love about that is you don't just take some of the BS that the world gives you.
No.
And when you were evaluating writing your first book, like I'm a guy that I'm that guy who my grammar's not as good as it should be. I got to read that email a few times.
Sure.
Right? And my handwriting is terrible.
Well, that's like most of us. I can barely read my own handwriting anymore. I could be a doctor.
Right? Yeah, hey, there you go. That's what I'm going to say, guys. I was supposed to be a doctor.
Right.
My significant other, she's in education. She's an administrator, and she came up through the tiers, a teacher and coach, so all that, and she just laughs because she's so spot on with everything.
Right.
So maybe she's the balance. But
So you lose at Scrabble.
Oh, crushes me. I will beat her at anything else competitive, but Scrabble,
Yeah.
I just know not to play. Can we do 2-letter words today? I got those down. Maybe we can evolve to 3, like I and dog. Maybe 4 if it's ball.
The one you hate to hear is, "That's not a word."
That's it. Looked like one to me. That's how my brain goes.
Yeah.
But what I love is, even though you were in the business of being a reporter, columnist, in all parts of the news media, the traditional news media, you then evolved. It makes sense. Hey, I'm going to write a book. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that thought came from, I have a lot to say.
Yes.
But then when you looked and figured out the book publishing business.
Yes, that was a shock.
Right? So speak to that. Even though I could read about you and who you are, speak to what you learned about that and how long it, because it went from this place, I'm going to write a book, pumped and excited. People want to hear about it. Talk about the evolution of understanding the publishing business, and as that goes on, is it the same today?
Well, my second book, the first was a collection of columns, which was pretty straightforward. The second one was about the riots in 2001 in Cincinnati. And my take was very contrary. The rebel, as you said. I'm a contrarian. When I see a crowd of people going in east, I want to go west and see what they're running from. So if I'm looking at this from a totally different side than the local media, I wrote the book, which was interviewing police and seeing it from their point of view, what really happened, how did the government work, and out. Anyway, so it was, I guess you'd say, countercultural, as we used to say in the 70s. In the true sense of the word, it was very counter to the culture of the time. And I took that to a publisher, and the publisher said, and this is a publisher that's not located in Cincinnati. And the publisher said, I don't think we can do this unless we make some changes. And I said, why is that? And she says, well, because this is not what really happened. And I said, now, wait a minute. I'm the editor. I'm on the ground there. I'm reporting these stories. I'm on the streets of Cincinnati, and you're telling me that you know better from another city what happened in Cincinnati than I did? Of course. We know that's not what happened because we read the newspapers. And I said, well, that's the whole point of this book, is to question what was written in the rest of the media from first person point of view, from the police who were there. Well, as you can tell, that didn't go well. Plus, I didn't like the idea that they were going to take my property and make changes that they wanted to make. That offended me. And then I looked at the business model, which is that just as sketching it out in very broad terms, if I have a book that's priced for $20 and I give it to them to publish, they give me 10% of the sales. So I'm making $2 a book. I thought, that's wrong. That's my work. That's my intellectual property. Why are you taking 90%? And all of that they were really giving me for that was some kind of vague promise that they would help me market the book. Well, I knew I could do that. So I came up with my own approach, and I said, I'm going to build a company, which kind of grew organically, and help people write books so that they own their own intellectual property. They will get good advice about editing and writing and coaching, but I'm never going to say this is how it has to be or you can't publish. So they generally follow direction, they follow advice, but they don't feel like they're pressured to make fundamental changes in their beliefs, for example, or their what they believe happened. So this version is entirely different. We charge by the hour. We give people basically a chance to own their own property, publish their book. We direct them to printers. We get them all the background stuff they need, ISBN number, copyright, everything else. We have a designer who designs their book and their cover. We have editors, that's me, and others that I hire sometimes from freelancers. And whatever is needed to build that book. And when they're finished, they pay the front-end costs back on an hourly basis. And once they pay that back, they keep everything. So basically, we flipped the model. Now they get the 90%, and we just take the 10%, which I think is the revolution in publishing. That's why independent publishers are popping up all over the place.
What would it cost? Now, everyone, but take one of these books. I won't. So take yours. We'll talk about some of them. So you brought us one today.
Yes.
So we'll talk about some of them, but this one's the Forbidden Fruit.
Right.
So it's a softback.
Mm-hmm.
What would this book? This is dense. There's a lot of stuff in here.
Yes.
Like I love that.
Lots of good pictures, too.
Yeah, this is good. So how much, if I weren't as educated or refined as a writer as you are,
mm-hmm.
how much would this book cost me to write if I had the content and
if
just
you wrote the book?
If I wrote the book,
you give me the manuscript.
Yep.
For the editing to make it conform to style. There's the wild card because it depends on how much editing is needed. Obviously,
with me a lot. Let's just say a lot.
Okay, so we're working hourly.
Yep.
So I seldom publish books that cost people more than about $5,000.
Okay, so maybe it's 10
All
grand
in.
for a guy like Mark.
All in.
Okay.
And that's except for your printing. Now,
Yeah.
when you get the whole thing is finished, the cover's designed, the interior's designed, all of the editing's done, you have a complete manuscript ready to go to a printer, then we hook you up with a printer, and usually we can find you printing for about $5 a book or less.
Okay. Depends on the volume.
You're looking at a $20 book.
Okay.
So your front end cost is $5,000 plus $5 a book.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at your business model when you're selling them for $20.
Yep. That's awesome.
Isn't that great?
That's really good. What's it cost? I won't put the name out here on this, but what's it cost for a hardback versus a soft?
We generally don't do hardbacks. We do a few because people just want the hardback, but it ruins your business model as a writer to sell that, because now you've gone from $5 a book printing to up to $10.
Okay.
Now it takes you so much longer to recover your front end costs. And I tell people, look, for your first book especially, you're going to have a hard time selling more than a few thousand. So you want to recover your front end cost and look at the long game, but don't buy something that's going to make it really expensive for people to buy, because then you got to go out and charge them instead of 20, you got to charge them $25, $30, $35 a book.
Then you're going up against the market when you aren't a brand yet, right?
Yes.
Right, when they aren't knowing, like, hey, so what I said about Charlie Rose in the beginning, he's kind of my North Star of a conversationalist. And I always tuned into Charlie Rose on the PBS stations, regardless of who he was interviewing. And it was very rare I would turn it off. Very rare.
Yeah.
And so a guy like me is not Charlie Rose of books yet. I'm not an author that people are, because there's authors like, wow, I'm just going to read it. Until you become that, don't make the big investment.
Well, you'd be surprised. People write books for all kinds of reasons. It's something that they've always wanted. They've always dreamed of having a book on their shelf with their name on it. And a lot of people just have a great story to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, we do inspirational books. We do devotionals. You've looked at the website. Books about sports, books about business, how-to, helping people in business, inspirational stories of people that started out with nothing and made it to become millionaires in apartment rentals, and really started broken homeless. So, these stories, people do have great stories to tell. And my job, because really Chili Dog Press is mostly me, but my job is to help them get their story told in a way that'll be approachable and readable to the average reader, and it'll look as professional as any book in the bookstore that you can see.
Are there any other books on Peter's horizon?
Well, I start in January usually with a book like this, and I work on it for the whole year and bring it out just in time for Christmas where the sales peak. And then I'll take some time off and market that book and do speaking and book signings and that kind of thing, and events like this. So I probably will get started on another one a year from January 24, unless I get the itch to write, because I'll tell you, I love the writing and research so much. It is the greatest joy to me to get up, and I get up very early because especially if I have a book I'm working on, I just can't wait to go to my office and sit down and dive into it. And the research, I describe it as being like a cross between a treasure hunt and being a detective. And the clues you find, and you trace them down, and you find something that's like, wow, that is so cool. I cannot wait to write about that. And now I just have to, put some more around it. And then the writing, it's my passion.
What do you think makes a best book? Is there a structure? Is there a format? What makes it best?
Yeah, that would have so many definitions. There are so many types of books. I read all kinds of books. I usually have like 4 or 5 books going at once. So I'm reading historical fiction. I'm reading nonfiction. I'm reading novels. I'm reading all kinds of things at once. And I love looking at how other writers work. But to me, it always comes back to being a storyteller. So if you can tell a story, like you're doing it right here on a podcast, you're a storyteller. If you can tell a story, then that's where it all begins. And most people, as you said, they have a story to tell. And I'll tell you what, though, I have clients that I meet with. I would say probably half of the people who come to me to write a book finish, because a lot of people don't realize the discipline that it takes and if you're busy with the rest of your life, it can be quite a daunting thing if you haven't written on deadline or had that experience. But boy, those who finish are just, there's nothing to substitute for that happy look when you put a book in their hands and say, this is yours.
It has to be a tremendous sense of accomplishment.
It is. It is.
Right? To do something you haven't done before. And I would bet that helps improve that individual. Because anytime I've done something hard for the first time, and I bet writing your first book is hard.
It is.
Right? And anytime I've done something, it proves to me I can do it.
Yeah.
And it makes me so much better as a human.
You've seen a dream come true. And when that happens, it reinforces the others you have. And then you say, well, what next?
What else can I do?
Yeah.
So if they want to find all your books, it is chilidogpress.com.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what else? Is that where we go to find the bookstore, to buy the books?
Exactly.
Where else? Are there any local Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, like Joseph Beth's around?
Oh,
and stuff?
all of the local bookstores, Joseph Beth, Booker Lee, Bookshelf in Madeira, you name it. Any local bookstore, you'll find my books, both of them. Also Amazon. We have a lot of sales there. You know, that also, I didn't mention it, but those kind of platforms, especially Amazon, will put millions of eyeballs on your title. And if your title is attractive and the subject is contemporary, or it has some appeal that fits the culture at the time, you'd be surprised how people can have success with their books. And that platform really, I think, more than anything, broke up what I call the publishing cartels, which controlled everything. Because now a writer like Mark can put his book on Amazon and have some really moderate success, better than anything he could have done with one of the big publishing houses in New York. So, you know, so my books, to go back to your question, all the local bookstores, but I try and encourage people to go to chilidogpress.com to buy them, because there I can sign you a copy.
That's awesome. I saw that when I went there.
Yes,
Yeah.
and also the Forbidden Fruit book that we have here today, that's one of the last press run of color books inside. So the color pictures inside are kind of critical in some of the parts about the Supper Club fire. And that's when that press run is gone, that'll be the end of those, and I'm going to go to black and white.
You're so cheap, Peter. You're trying to make an extra 50 cents on us? What's going on here, man?
It's just the economics of publishing, I'll tell you.
Oh, man.
I have to be conscious of that.
Yeah. So how many, when you print that next one in black and white, how many will you print?
Well, I go with print on demand, so I can print a few hundred, I can print 1,000, I can do whatever I want, and the price stays the same. Or if I go with one of the Ohio printers that I like to use, which is Post Printing out of Minster, Ohio, they do a great job and really good people. There, you're printing, I would usually have a press run of 3,000 or 4,000.
Okay. How do you start writing a book? What do you do? What do you put down first? The chapters, the ideas, just start writing?
Yes. Good question. So I start with an outline, which everybody was taught, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Outline it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And as you fill in your outline, it'll get bigger and bigger because you start padding and putting things in. It's not cast in concrete, so your outline may not even resemble the finished project because the chapters will change. They lead in different direction. Those hallways with all the doors, you open a door that says, oh, my gosh, there's a whole
another book,
another topic or another book,
yeah.
Right? So that's how I get started. It starts with an idea. For me, it was in this first book, it was the fact that I'd always heard about the Supper Club fire, and I was curious about it, and I'd done just enough reporting on it to know that there were a lot of questions about whether or not that was an accident or was it intentional. And I said, well, hey, why not research the heck out of it and see what I can find out?